Hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Christy Jansen.
And I'm Carissa Garcia.
And we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help us all get focused on what's going right in the world.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy podcast. Today is Friday, the 4th of February, 2022. Hey, Christy, how are you doing?
Hi, Carissa. I'm great. We are here today without Summers, who was supposed to show up, but she is right now stuck in a snowstorm in Texas. So we will get through the day, and I'm very lucky to be in California. So are you, right, Carissa? You're here too.
Yes, exactly. We're lucky to be in Santa Barbara.
We are, we've got like 40-degree overnights and 60-something degree highs. So we really have nothing to complain about right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about all our friends and our readers who are being affected by the storms right now. I hope it's not too cold over there.
Yes. Well, speaking of other places in this country, today we have a guest who'll be joining us for a really special edition of the Optimist Daily Update, Liz Brunner, who is actually in Boston right now. So she's looking forward to the next version of this storm as it gets into the north. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Christy and Carissa. Yes, I know I can feel summer's pain because that same storm system is supposedly coming our way in the next 12 to 24 hours. So we're bracing for yet another snowstorm. We had a blizzard, of course, last weekend, and now we have this coming our way. We had 2 feet of snow in Boston. Now they're expecting all this ice and snow and winter in New England. That's the way it is.
That's the way it is. I know. I was actually in Boston last summer, and I had this fantastic Uber driver who was talking about just how Mother Nature's been, she's like a menopause. She can't make up her mind.
Well, then she must be perpetually in menopause here in New England, because they always say there's a phrase here in New England that is, wait 5 minutes and the weather's going to change. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, that was what Chicago used to say, too. I think you're from Illinois originally, right, Liz?
Yes. Well, Hawaii and Illinois, but yes, predominantly Illinois. And then now Massachusetts. I've been here for 28 years now.
Goodness. Wow. Well, anyway, let me read a little bit about your biography just so people know who you are. Liz Brunner is an award-winning journalist, executive communications coach, motivational speaker, and podcast host. She's the CEO of her company, Brunner Communications. And she was on television for 28 years as a co-anchor for the #1 rated 6 p.m. newscast in Boston at ABC TV WCVB News Center 5. And she's conducted exclusive one-on-one interviews with many prominent figures ranging from professional athletes to global political leaders, including President Barack Obama, and cultural icons such as Oprah Winfrey, 2 people I deeply admire. In 2013, she started her new chapter, which was to found her own company, Brunner Communications. And she also launched the BrunnerAcademy.com in 2020, which gives some of her wisdom to folks who are not co-located with her wherever she happens to be in the country. And she's dedicated to helping people find their authentic voice, telling their stories with presence and leading with authenticity. She's also the host of the Live Your Best Life with Liz Brunner podcast. And she's right now got a book out. It's coming out called Dare to Own You, Taking Your Authenticity and Dreams into Your Next Chapter, which I've really enjoyed reading. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much again. It's great to be here with you guys. Thank you.
So first of all, why don't we talk a little bit about your background before you got into television? Because you had a slightly different path into being a TV news anchor than most people would expect.
I feel like I'm in my 4th chapter right now because my very first professional career chapter was as a high school music teacher. My degree is actually in vocal performance and music education from Lawrence University's Conservatory of Music. And I taught high school music for a couple of years. I also sang semi-professionally with a chorale that was based outside of the Chicago area. So we were touring Europe, singing in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Greece, all of those wonderful opportunities. And a couple of years in, I just felt like there was something more I was supposed to do. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know what it was, but I felt like I had to pursue that path. So I left teaching once my contract ended. I worked in retail because obviously I had to pay some bills. And I then decided I had done one television commercial when I was Miss Illinois 1979 and competed in the Miss America pageant, which I'm very grateful for because all of the money that I received from my reign was all scholarship money and it paid for my education. So I have no complaints about that. And what I thought about was, I wonder if I could do something in television. And I was reading this wonderful book called Who's Hiring Who by Richard Lathrop, and it talked about informational interviews. Now, I don't know about either of you, but I had never heard of such a thing. I bravely and blindly called up the 2 television stations that were in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, which was where I was living at the time. What does somebody like me do? Do I need to go back to college? Do I need to get another degree? Is what I think I'm even interested in doing in television even exist? I thought it was going to be something around public relations. Reader's Digest version now. After about 6 months of conversation with the CBS affiliate, a position was created for me. And I literally learned everything from the ground up. It was my own graduate school. And one thing led to another. So I was there for 3 years. Then I got called to the CBS affiliate in Tampa, Florida. So I went from the 75th market to the 13th market, which was Tampa. I was there for 5 years, and again, my career continued to unfold there, and more opportunities came my way. I was there for 5 years before I got the call to go to WCVB, which is the ABC affiliate in Boston, and then I had a 20-year run at WCVB News Center 5, and so collectively 28 years. But then a couple of years before I actually left, I started feeling like, again, there was something more I was supposed to do. And I didn't know how to explain it. And I started having informational interviews again. I went back to that process and just reached out to a lot of community leaders, asking them, well, what do you think my skill set is? What else do you think I could do? And you know what was so interesting is that some people would say, well, I see you on the news every night. So I see you read the news. I'm thinking there's more to it than just reading the news. And then others would ask me other questions. And what I learned was that I had to translate television language into language that corporate people could understand. For example, breaking news in my world could be crisis management in the corporate world. Being a project manager in the corporate world could translate to me being a reporter and a producer of my own stories in the television world. And once I started to connect the dots for them, now suddenly it made sense.
I can relate to your journey and your story with kind of going from one thing to the next, following what seems to make sense for you in the moment, but not necessarily what makes sense in terms of your particular education or training. And then even what you're talking about in relation to how a project manager relates to being a producer of your own stories, because I came from a corporate background, a project management background into the communications roles that I'm in now. And it's very true. Producing stories is very much like being a project manager.
It is. And what we don't understand sometimes, and I really want your audience to understand this, all of the knowledge, all of the experiences, and you know from my book, the quote in there from my grandmother is, no knowledge is ever wasted. No knowledge, no experience is ever wasted. And when you can begin to think outside the box, connect the dots of those experiences, good and bad, that come along the way, because it's all experience, it's all knowledge, you can create next chapters for yourself. And for me, I mean, it really, if you step back and think about it, okay, I was storytelling when I was singing using my voice. When I was on television, I was speaking stories using my voice. And now with my company, Brunner Communications, again, I'm using my voice. I'm helping other people, coaching other people how to learn to use their voice, telling their story, whether it's a pitch, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a speech. When you think about it, there is some linear path there, but it doesn't seem like it from the outside looking in initially.
No, and I think even just having the ability to articulate what that path is, and for you now in your current role, helping other people find that through line for their lives. Right. And having that coherent narrative of your personal experience is one thing that I believe kind of gives you power over that experience, and also that confidence that we all need to gain in order to take those next steps.
We do. And as you know from the book, it really does take courage to be confident. And confidence has an ebb and flow to it. Some days, hey, I'm on top of the world, and you feel like you've got it all by the tail. And then there are other days you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's not my best days. But collectively, when we step back, it does take courage, particularly on those days when you feel like you're lacking courage.
Right.
You have to find a way to create it. Sometimes you have to talk to yourself, do whatever. If you need to read a mantra, if you need to have quotes, if you need to listen to something uplifting, music, whatever it is that's going to give you courage to then find that confidence so that you can do what you need to do, what you want to do, and be your best authentic self.
Well, I think that one of the things about your book, and I'll just read the title again, Dare to Own You, that I really appreciated was how it's a combination of very personal stories from your experience. And you get vulnerable where you're talking about your own experience of feeling completely insecure and like a fish out of water in different places.
Many times.
as you've gone through your life. And I found that super refreshing. You don't get personal. It's not like a tell-all kind of personal. It's like that. What's the inner experience of being that person who looks so perfectly put together? Because you absolutely do. And you know how to put yourself together and look like you know what's going on. But that inner experience of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing right now.
Right. And I had many of those experiences. And believe me, being that vulnerable and that authentic to share those experiences in the book, that in and of itself was a bit of a hurdle. But I felt it was so important.
I believe it. But the thing that I also liked is that there's some really wonderful practical wisdom and even tips on how to practice confidence, right? How do you, and reflections in the end of each chapter where you invite your readers to reflect on their own experiences around the topics that you brought up in that chapter and how they can find those kinds of courage or that sense of self-permission to even feel like it's okay to have a dream, it's okay to have a goal, to aspire to be something that you feel like maybe you're not quite there yet.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And that's where the title comes in of Dare to Own You, giving yourself permission to own who you are, to own that authenticity. And I really hope that people, when they read the book, will take time to reflect and answer those very poignant questions, which I've asked myself many times, still ask myself some days. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that when you take the time to reflect on those questions and the answers that you come up with honestly, you can begin to look at yourself and gain more authenticity, own more of who you are, find more of your own confidence. And let's face it, 3/4 of the population at some point in time deals with imposter syndrome, of inner feelings of self-doubt or am I good enough? And maybe we have perfectionistic syndrome as well. There are a lot of things that go into play. We feel like, oh, I'm not perfect enough. I don't have enough of the credentials to go after this job. Well, guess what? You probably do. You just have to have the confidence to go for it and own who you are. And believe me, it's not easy to own who we are sometimes. Sometimes we don't like some of the things that we find out about ourselves.
Right.
That's part of the process.
That's such an interesting observation that sometimes you have to look at what you actually are bringing and even the negative qualities. It's not just about self-promotion or self-boosting in terms of getting confidence, but also looking at what are things you need to change or learn from.
Well, that's what I love about the coaching process, because we all come to the table at a different place on that learning curve, number one, and everybody learns differently, number two. And number three, we all have strengths and we all have, I don't like to call them weaknesses necessarily. I like to say
shadow self.
They're challenges, okay?
Challenges, yeah.
But we have to be willing to look at them. We're not going to, get obsessed with them because that goes the opposite direction. But it is being willing to look at those things honestly, because a lot of the things that got us to where we are today may not get us to where we want to go tomorrow. And Marshall Goldsmith talks about this all the time. In fact, he has a wonderful book about that. But the point is we have to be willing to change some of those habits and be willing to look at them and say, you know what, that may not be serving me well. It's just a habit and I can change it. Now, you may need help changing it. I didn't say it was going to necessarily be easy, but we can change it. And we have to be willing to work at it sometimes to make those changes. What I find so interesting is a couple of things. One, I often see the progress in clients before they do. I often see the confidence growing in them before they do. But when they see it, man, that's like icing on the cake. It's like the best feeling in the world. And the second thing is that if you're not willing to look at yourself and if you're not willing to make changes, because some people say, well, this is who I am. This is my authentic self. Okay. But if you're not where you want to be, if you're not being seen and heard the way you would like to be seen and heard, then you're just being stubborn.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just not willing to make changes. And that's part of the whole coaching process. You have to be open. And it's like peeling the layers of an onion because you got to get down to the core sometimes of where some of this stuff comes from. Why are you nervous when you get up and speak in front of a group of people? Why do you feel like you're not good enough? There's a lot that goes into it just to figure out who we are.
I totally related to the anxiety about your capabilities that you talked about a little bit earlier in your career, I think, and that whole idea of imposter syndrome. And it feels like, and you even point this out, that while it feels like we all come into moments of feeling really anxious or insecure, but it seems like more women have a harder time owning themselves and owning that confidence than men do. I was interested in hearing you reflect on that.
I think that women are more vocal about it than men are. And the same thing applies with imposter syndrome, because the research has suggested that men and women suffer from imposter syndrome equally. Men, however, tend to hide it, not talk about it, ignore it, whereas women will, they may talk about it, they may acknowledge it, they may seek help for it. And I think that's the difference between men and women when it comes to imposter syndrome. So I think that's what the research is suggesting too, that it really happens equally. Men are socialized not to show feelings sometimes.
Right. And just to bluster through and act as if they have confidence even when they feel like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So interesting. I didn't really think about it from that point of view, but I think you're probably right.
Well, that's what the research is suggesting, and I happen to concur. Well, I believe that's part of it. It's true.
That's interesting. The other interesting observation that you made that I was interested in exploring a little bit is when you're talking about finding mentors and the nature of the competitiveness between women that you encounter, that other of your clients have encountered, where it seems like there's a feeling of being threatened by other women. And so that leads to a lack of support, a lack of mentorship from senior women at times. And whereas male mentors seem to have an easier time stepping forward and giving the kind of booster support that a younger person coming up the ladder might need. Do you feel like is that happening mostly early, like from in the 80s and 90s, 2000s? Do you think that's changing at all? Or I'm just curious to hear you reflect on that experience.
I think it's still the case. I mean, granted, I'm not in the corporate world like I was before. I mean, I'm working with corporations and I'm working with individuals within a corporation, and I'm still seeing it. I'm still seeing it and hearing about it. So I don't think it's changed, unfortunately. And I do think that women feel threatened sometimes by other women. And I share a story in the book about a woman who prided herself on being supportive of women and saying that she always had support from other women. And she really didn't understand this concept that I was experiencing and expressing to her. And yet, when one time came where she could have supported me, she introduced me to a male colleague as, you should see Liz Brunner in Flywheel. She has one of the best bodies in Boston. Now, how in the world is this man, this CEO, going to take me seriously and think of me as a coach to lead his team?
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded. Absolutely. And I'm rarely speechless, but I was in that moment for at least a few seconds. I thought, what do I say? I don't remember what I said now, but holy mackerel.
I just think this is a really interesting subject to talk about because I don't know that women acknowledge it that much.
I don't think they do. And I think that's part of the problem is that women think that they're being supportive because, oh, maybe I've helped somebody do this or I've helped somebody do that. But true mentorship is being willing to bring somebody up the ladder with you. True mentorship, in my opinion, is being able to guide, share advice, and bring along. And then not only is mentorship important, but being a supporter is important. Have you recommended another woman for a particular position? Have you gone to somebody to say, you know, this person did an exceptional job on XYZ. I think you should pay attention to her. Those are the kind of people that you need in your corner as supporters. So it's not just mentorship, but it's also being a sponsor and being a supporter.
Do you think that it comes from a sense of basically feeling insecure?
I think it does in terms of why you aren't willing to support women. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know, when women get a seat at the table, they've worked so hard to get that seat, and sometimes they're the only one in that seat. And God forbid somebody else is going to come along and take my seat.
Right.
How about just adding to the table?
Right. And you get stuck in that kind of zero-sum game thinking, right?
Yes.
Where there's only one seat at the table for a woman. So if another woman's coming in, I'm going to lose mine.
Right. And I think there's that mentality because we worked so hard to get that seat.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to give it up. But God forbid somebody's going to come along and take it. And even when I was in the anchor chair, I mean, holy cow, there was somebody always nipping at my heels who wanted that seat. So I'm used to a lot of competition.
Krista, I want to invite you to come in and share any of your thoughts.
Oh my gosh, yes. I've just been listening carefully over here, and I just wanted to jump in, and you guys are probably going to laugh at me because I'm 22 years old, but it's so interesting to hear, and it's so reassuring to hear about both of your stories that you guys have been talking about, especially you, Liz, since you're our guest. Just about how your paths are linear in a way, but they're not linear. You guys have jumped around from different professions, and it's all worked out in the end. And at 22, you know, everybody's telling you like it will all work out in the end, but in the back of your head, you're also still, and I'm sure even past 22, it's still this thought in the back of your head that I had to have it calculated what's going to go on next. But
no.
That's
go on.
Yeah. And in the back of my head, I know that's there as a 22-year-old who just graduated not that long ago. And so I love hearing these stories about throughout your whole life, you can grapple with yourself and you can develop your confidence. But in a way, I guess you will still always be shaping yourself.
Yes. Couple of things here. First of all, thank you for sharing that you're 22, and thank you for jumping in. And I want you to think about this, and anyone who's in their 20s listening to this is the time to explore. Mm-hmm. This is the time to test and experiment. Well, what sticks? What do I like to do? What am I enjoying? Okay, maybe that didn't work out, but it's not a failure. It's a learning opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so then in your 30s, you begin to have a little bit more experience and you kind of hone in a little bit more. But that doesn't mean that you have to stay in that lane. And I do believe that we're always continuing to grow and learn. Otherwise, we're not living. It is a journey. And while now I'm in my 60s, which I cannot even believe, like, how did that happen? But it's true. We continue to grow. We continue to learn. So for you, I just want you to think about that. This is the time to really explore and experience and continue to be open to what life brings you and opportunities, unexpected opportunities that may come your way. Go for it.
I love that.
It's nice to hear you guys talking, Liz, with your wisdom for Carissa, who I think both Summers and I really treasure the younger members of our team. And we are very oriented towards supporting them and helping them grow and find their own voices, however that develops.
Exactly.
Even if sometimes we train them and they would go off and do something else in the world.
Go fly out of the nest. Go fly.
Another thing I really was interested in, because we at the Optimist Daily have a mission to help shift, like there's a very negative bias in the news. And there's also a bias of just getting stuck in the headlines, which are usually dominated by things which are more frightening or enraging because it's the model is about keeping the attention of your audience so that you can sell more advertising or sell more impressions, whatever. But you came up in the news world in a different era. And I would just be curious to hear you reflect on that. You mentioned in your book how it felt like the female anchors on the programs you were helping to anchor seemed to be getting younger and younger. And that's an interesting thing. And that the stories were getting shorter and less deep, at least on news television.
No, it's true.
So I'm curious to hear you reflect on that experience.
Well, a couple of reflections. The first of which is I do not miss breaking news. And some people have said to me, don't you want to work with people in crisis management? No, I do not. I want to enjoy my life. I want it to be optimistic every day and positive and uplifting. So no, I don't miss all of that. I think the other thing that's really important is that, yes, the whole industry has changed dramatically from when I first entered the industry, 30 some years ago, where stories were longer, they were more in depth, and everything was very black and white. And what I mean by that is it was very clear. We're delivering you facts. We're not giving you an opinion on the news. We're giving you facts. You can make your own decision. And I believe now the lines are very blurred. There's a lot of gray. And I think part of that gray is coming from the fact that everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie. If you think about when television first started, or even when I first got into it, there were, 3 major networks, then CNN came along. Now look at the pie. How many stations do you have an opportunity to watch? If you're on DirecTV, I think it's like 1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So think about it. The size of the pie is the same, but the slices are smaller, which means that whatever slice you're in, you're trying to get the attention of the audience. So you're going to do and say things that might be provocative. You might add more of an opinion than you normally would. Now, I'm not saying all professional news organizations do that, but I do think the lines are more blurred than they ever used to be. So I don't miss any of that. And then because attention spans are so much shorter, think about Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything's quick. People don't have the attention spans that they used to. At least most people don't. People want their information like a microwave. Boom, give me it now. Boom, Sam, bam, 10 seconds. I get it. I understand what's going on.
Which actually leads me to my next question
go for
you. Because one of the things I found interesting in this book, which I think came out in 2021, which meant that you were working on it during the pandemic shutdowns and the slowdowns. And you do reflect on that in the final chapter. But the whole world was kind of asked to take a pause, to take a break. I mean, it was very traumatic for many people because of the loss and the grief. People lost their jobs, they lost loved ones, and they just lost their routines. But it's also, as you talk about, it was an opportunity to think about things in a different way. And so we were just talking about how attention spans got shorter, but in the pandemic, we were forced to all pay attention together and slow down. So I'm interested to hear you reflect on that. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that your book and your mission, it's sort of the perfect moment to talk about that reassessment.
I have a theory, which is that the pandemic happening in 2020 is not a coincidence. Think about this. When you go to the eye doctor and you're sitting in that chair and you're looking across the wall at the big chart with the big E on it, and the ophthalmologist says, okay, read the smallest line that you can. I want to see where your 20/20 vision is if you even have it. And you're looking at that and you're looking and you're figuring out and you're trying to get 20/20 vision. The pandemic happened in 2020. We were forced to look at ourselves. Were our lives where we wanted them to be? And if not, what did we need to do we need to do to get there? We looked at social justice issues in a huge way in 2020. And I think we're still looking at ourselves because of the pandemic. And I just think it's kind of ironic that the pandemic happened in 2020. We were forced to look at our lives, and we are continuing to look at our lives. My whole vision for my life right now, both personally and professionally, is I want to teach, I want to motivate, and I want to inspire people to live their best life, whatever that is for them. And each one of us has probably a different definition. But because of the pandemic, we were forced to stop and ask ourselves some very important questions. I started writing the book in the summer of 2019, but kind of got off course, so I stopped. And I picked it back up again in March of 2020, and I was really ready to write it. And maybe the pandemic also forced me to really look and ask myself many of the questions that I ask readers to ask themselves in the book. And when you kind of bring all that together, and when I started rewriting or continuing to write in March, I was obsessed. I really was so compelled to write it. And the more I wrote, the more I had to say. And the more I had to say, the more I had to write. And before I knew it, within 3 or 4 months, I had finished the book. But I think because of the pandemic, many of us really stopped and asked ourselves some important questions, and we're still asking ourselves those questions, which I'm really glad that we're asking ourselves, because as a society, we can do better. We can all be better. And the pandemic did that for us.
Yeah, and I hope that we can remember some of those early moments when we were really slow. I feel like it's brought up all of this. Wounds are still being exposed, and there's going to be some more healing that has to happen. And we're still in the middle of it. It's not over yet.
No, it's not over yet. And we're stumbling along trying to figure out how do we get back to some normalcy. And I think we'll get back to some normalcy eventually, but I also think that we are going to kind of have to learn to live with this, live with COVID in the way that we've learned to live with the flu and the cold and everything else. Sure. And I think, many researchers and doctors suggest the same thing, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
And we're going to have to learn to live with, when you start opening up and asking yourself these questions, it's hard to unask those questions.
Oh, yeah. Once you open the Pandora's box.
Yeah.
You can't close it back up again, and I don't think you should.
Right.
And
so we're going to have,
it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. It is. And so the unknown is still unknown. We're still in uncertain times. And in the meantime, we've got all of these nasties flying around.
Exactly.
So this has been such a great conversation, Liz. It's time for us to wind down. And I don't know if we mentioned this to you, but this is the Optimist Daily. And I know that you are an entrepreneur, so that means that you're an optimistic by nature personality.
Absolutely.
But what we always like to finish our conversations with our guests is asking them, what is it that's making them optimistic? What is it in the world today that's igniting your optimism?
Many things. The first thing that comes to my mind is a quote by my mother, which I would love to share, which is this: the goal of living is to be able to absorb all of the pain of life and lose none of the joy. All of us are going to experience challenges. None of us is immune. We can just look around where you are right in this moment of time. There is always something that you can be thankful for. There is always something that could potentially make you smile. It could be a commercial, for heaven's sake, on TV. You see a little puppy bouncing around. Find the moments of joy each day, because life is challenging and sometimes it's very hard. And I'm struck by, you probably know the story of Chelsea Christ from Extra, who recently committed suicide.
I did.
To the outside world, everybody thought she was the happiest person in the world. And she had only recently revealed to her mother about her deep, deep, deep depression. And it breaks my heart that someone like her, who had such a beautiful spirit about her, wasn't able to find enough joy that she felt leaving this world was the only option. So look around you. Find those moments of joy, because they're there. There's always something to be optimistic about, even in the worst of times.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. And I agree with you. And it's those moments when things fall apart that we can look at how we want to rebuild them into a different direction.
Right. And, I do want to share with your listeners that on BrunnerAcademy.com, besides my flagship public speaking course, I have 4 new courses that align with the book: Dare to Go for Your Goals, Here's another one. Speaking of what we were just talking about, dare to rise above tough times. Dare to shift from procrastination to motivation. And dare to find peace of mind, which is a beginner's meditation mindfulness course. So all of those really speak to what you guys are talking about and why you do the show that you do. The Optimist Daily. You're trying to get people to really open their eyes to see what's possible in life and how you can have an optimistic life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for explaining that again. I like how you put that, Liz. And thank you so much for being here on the Optimist Daily Update today. And I guess that's it. Carissa, any last words before we say goodbye?
That's it for me. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining. And like I said earlier, it was so great to hear your story. And I love your reflection on optimism.
Well, it was delightful to be with both of you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Optimist Daily Update. We promise to keep sharing positive solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and help ensure it is change for the good. And we promise to keep covering current events with accurate, legitimate sources and offering you the information we all need to chart new paths for all of us. And if you are not already, please consider becoming an emissary on optimistdaily.com. And for starting at just $5 a month, you can help support reader-funded independent journalism. That is what we do, and be part of that solution-changing consciousness that addresses our world's biggest challenges with a problem-solving mindset. That's it for today, everybody. We'll be back on Monday with more solutions.